From the vault, high atop the pastoral center of the Diocese of Camden, you're listening to Talking Catholic.
Hello and welcome to Talking Catholics podcast. It's Kari Janisse here today, and I am excited to be with another good friend of mine, but it's not Mike Walsh today. It is Pete Sanchez. So Pete, welcome. So great to be here with you.
Kari. Thanks so much. This is always a pleasure to see you. And we're Zooming today.
We are on Zoom. We're back to Zoom for a little while. It's it's not always ideal for us to still get together all the time or schedule wise. So today it's a little easier for us to go on Zoom with our guest that we have. And so we are through Zoom, but it's good to see you through the screen.
Yes.
How you been, Pete? I haven't gotten to talk to you over the whole pandemic and stuff. I know you've continued working with the Catholic Star Herald, but how's things going for you?
Things are going all right. Just trying to keep busy with this time. I'm sure we all are, our routines. So we're really learning new things or trying new things. And one of the things I'm really trying to do is cook more. So I've kind of been trying to perfect actually omelets.
Oh, nice. I'm a breakfast person.
I'm not 100% yet. My skill level is probably about 60%. Before all this was probably 30. So
you're so honest with yourself.
Well, I can't practice. I can't do the flip. That's the thing that's killing me. So that's kind of been my not only breakfast, but dinner too, just trying to experiment and, all this time. So I got to use it, I think.
Good for you. That's awesome. I grew up in North Jersey, as I mentioned several times, especially for our domestic church media listeners who are from all over New Jersey. But I worked in a little bagel shop, which I realized they don't have too many of those down in South Jersey. There's a few, but in North Jersey, they're pretty in every town. And I learned how to cook breakfast there on the grill. So omelets are one of the only things I actually cook because I am not the cook in my family. My husband is. So I can maybe come and teach you how to flip it one day.
Well, there's a good bagel place in Cherry Hill. The bagel spot. I'll
have to check it out.
I haven't been back there since this quarantine. But I've been meaning to go back. Normally on Sundays, my family and I would go there. But yeah, I love a good bagel. I found it's funny you mentioned North Jersey because there's a place in, I can't remember the name. I remember there's a place called the Picatinny Arsenal that's up there. And I forget the town, but there's a fantastic bagel place up there. If you look, Sparta. Oh,
that's way up there. Yeah. That my sister lives near there. Yeah. So where I was from, Cambridge Bagel in Bloomfield, Cambridge Bagel Shop in Bloomfield, New Jersey. If you're ever up that way, check it out. It still exists and it still has the best bagels.
Nice. It's always good to talk bagels. I love the everything bagel. You got to get the everything bagel.
So you're talking to somebody that used to love bagels and is now gluten-free. So the bagels that are gluten-free are terrible. So you're making me jealous at this point. But all right, I digress. Let's move on. So we have you back today as a guest host, which is so exciting because you, Pete, have a background in writing, right? Did you major in that in college?
I did English undergrad, and then I stayed on at St. Joe's University to get my graduate in writing studies.
Nice. So that makes you way more the expert on this topic than me that we have today, which is all about writing and Catholic poetry and a passion for writing with faith intertwined, right, for today's guest. For our guest today. So are you there, Pete? You're good? Okay, cool. So it's all about writing and Catholic poetry. And so our guest is Nicole Rollender. So, hey, Nicole, you've been with us here listening to us talk about bagels. How are you?
I have, and I just had to say, I grew up in North Jersey, and I also worked in a bagel shop and a bakery.
Oh my gosh. We were meant to talk about it today.
Yeah, so the bakery and the bagel shop no longer exists, but I did make the eggs that went on the bagels, and then in the bakery decorated cakes and everything. So I'm like over there nodding my head.
It's wild. Where in North Jersey did you grow up?
So I grew up in Washington Township, and then I moved to the Bridgewater area, and then moved down here right after I got married. So I've lived all over New Jersey. For my whole
North Central, if you believe in a central, and then south.
Yeah.
I was a little more, just slightly north of you, in Bloomfield, but yeah, it's the best bagels I bet you would say since coming down here. I did the same thing. I moved down here once I got married, so we're all in good company. You guys got the writing thing, I got the North Jersey thing.
We all got the bagel thing,
and we all got the bagel thing.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, Nicole, it's so good to have you with us. And tell us first the name of your company, and then I would love for you to talk just a little bit about your background as a Catholic, because I believe you grew up Catholic your whole life.
Yeah, my business is called Strand Writing Services, and we probably will get into the story about that a little bit, but I feel like God and my faith kind of led me into launching my own business. But yeah, a Catholic my whole life, went to church every Sunday. When I met my husband, he was not a Catholic, but shortly after we got married, he converted, and we decided obviously that we would raise our kids as Catholics. And we have 2 kids who go to St. Mary's School in Williamstown with Our Lady of Peace Parish. And when we moved down here, and we started attending, I guess it was St. Mary's Church at the time, right?
Right.
But the community is just so amazing there and so welcoming. And so even before we had kids, we were like, yeah, it's amazing that there's a school here. And so my daughter is in 5th grade, my son's in 1st grade. And I will say the live streaming church has been interesting.
Hey, you're talking to the person behind the camera. What is interesting? What, just as far as not being there, or
not being there, but we have made a point. Okay, because we feel kind of bad that we're not actually in the church, so we do watch it live every week.
Right, I see you on.
But it's pretty cool. I mean, we're kind of sad that we can't go to communion, so it's great that you have the spiritual communion prayer there. My daughter reads it. We all pray.
Oh, that's awesome.
But yeah, that's been really great. I've been doing the Wednesday morning masses with Father Maz, and the different prayers. So that's been really cool to kind of have that. To feel like we can still participate even though we're at home. Although I will say, I've had coffee here and there during Mass.
That's okay. That's part of the quarantine right now, watching from home.
But I saw this meme on Facebook, and it was this woman walking into church with the curlers in her hair in the bathroom and the coffee. And I'm thinking, that's not me.
I love my coffee too. We are all in good company today.
I have coffee here right now too.
Nice.
At night. But yeah. So yeah, I mean, I've been really close to the Catholic faith my whole life. And I think the fact that my parents, really instill, I went to a Catholic grammar school and then high school. And I think the fact that we went to church every Sunday that was the thread that really kept me consistent through all periods of my life, and at least, tied to my faith in a really good way, really strong way.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. And it's so great to hear that you still watch faithfully as a family, the Mass, and God willing, maybe even by the time this airs, we'll be back at least to a small percentage of people allowed with social distancing, but still allowed to go to Mass. And I know you're one of the people that I've seen in Mass all the time on Sunday mornings with your family. It's beautiful with your 2 kids. I always see them there. And your daughter's also involved in my youth ministry as the youngest youth ministry. So I hope she continues through the years. So you could see your faith really woven in your entire life and your family's life, which I think is beautiful. And then it got woven into your writing as well, right? So Pete, you're going to lead us off with some of those questions.
I'm curious. I was reading some of the stuff and that you talked about, and that you sent us your writing, and beautiful stuff, beautiful, not only poetry but prose. And I really was touched by it, Nicole. And you name dropped a few saints, which is pretty cool too. So we'll get into all that, and we'll even have maybe a little poetry reading later on. That would be awesome. So you just say, how did you get into writing? How long has that been a part of your life?
I mean, honestly, it was pretty easy because when I was 4, I was like, I'm going to be a writer. And then I just followed that path. I mean, like you, Pete, I got my degree in undergrad in literature, and then I went on to get a graduate degree in poetry. And it was like funny, I'm getting my MFA in writing poetry. People were like, you're just sitting there writing poetry. And I'm like, no, we also, taught and learned all, did different things. But it was pretty much a constant. It was almost like I couldn't not do it, if that makes sense. It was just part of who I was, and so I always did it. I went through a period of time where I was like, oh, I'm going to be an archaeologist, and I'm going to go to the Holy Land or Egypt or something. And then I was like, oh, maybe that might be too dangerous, so I'll just be a writer. But even my career, I mean, I really kind of worked in magazines most of my career until I started my business. So I think it's always just been really part of me and what I do. Like, I have piles of poetry books everywhere, and I know it's not, say the mainstream thing, because if you tell people you're a poet, they think it's like rhymey stuff or like old fashioned formal type verse or Shakespeare or something like that. But there's a thriving, there's a thriving community of people writing poetry, and the internet has really, transformed how you can meet other people who are writing and how you can share your work digitally. And so you can write a poem, you can put out yourself, you can get published in a journal, and it's out there and people can read it. And I think it's a pretty amazing thing. And I even noticed that there are more Catholic publications and websites popping up featuring Catholic poets, which I think is really cool. So there's an intersection of, religion and art.
Now, it's interesting having this podcast with you, Nicole, because when this pandemic started, I was trying to really make sense of everything. And one of the ways I did it is I started writing some poetry, and specifically haikus. I was writing haikus, which is a 575 format for those who don't know. It kind of,
is that words, Pete? Is that 5 words,
5 syllables,
words, 5 words?
7 syllables.
Syllables.
Sorry,
okay.
Kari. I didn't understand it well.
I am like, so I'm going to be asking all the questions that maybe listeners might be asking because this is not my field. Although I will say, as I was an art major in college, fine art and graphic design, it kind of all falls under the arts. And that for that respect, I do appreciate it so
You do have a
much.
creative spirit too, Kari. I mean,
thank you.
So, get into that, Nicole. So I was trying to make sense of what was going on around me. Is that kind of why you write too, to try to make sense of things?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And I also am managing editor on Thrush Literary Journal, and we noticed when the pandemic started, we had a huge influx in submissions of poetry from people who said, I've never written a poem before, and this coronavirus, the poems weren't good, I'm saying, but the written word and poetry especially, people go to it when they're feeling emotion. And I always feel like if there's chaos, you can create art out of chaos. You can create this sense of it out of the chaos. And then what's even better is when you write something like that, somebody else can enter that space, can hear the poem, can read the poem, and they see their own experience in it. It's like if you think about Jesus, being a human, and with kids, my kids are always asking, well, why did he do this? Why did he do that? Things like that. And so it simplifies it. But when you think about his human experience and we look at that, we're like, oh, well, if he went through that, then we can go through that, or here's what we learned from him. And so I think that's kind of a good way to think about poetry through the lens of faith. It's a way to relate to others, to not feel so alone, to feel connected when we feel often, when we often do feel disconnected from, people, God sometimes, we're unsure of where we're going. And then the other thing too is that I remember when I was younger and I would read poems that had been written, 1,000 years ago, or even saints like Hildegard von Bingen, that not, from the 1100s. And she wrote a lot of chants that became, sort of chants, like a little bit of offbeat Gregorian chants. And you think to yourself, you can still read those words, their experiences from 1,000, 2,000, whatever years ago. So the written word is pretty powerful. Yeah. And so I think it is definitely something. And the idea of oral history is like passing down what we experienced during this time. So in 100 years, when people look back at this time, they're gonna see all the videos and all of that, but they're also going to read things that we wrote.
And one of the I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You name dropped Anne Lamott in one of your writings, I saw, and I actually just reread her book, Bird by Bird. And okay, so you're familiar. Well, I love that one of the final sentences it talks about how writing, the act of writing, is there's a storm around us, but we're learning to dance in it. We're learning to sing in it. That's how. Do you agree with that?
Yes, writing. I will say this: writing is not "quote unquote" fun, right? It's because you're getting something out, you're refining something, you may be experiencing feelings, and for me, I do it as my job and also as my artistic craft. So when you end up producing something meaningful and beautiful, it's amazing. But the act of doing it can be hard. You can hear the cliche writer's block, but I mean that is a thing, and we don't always know the next word to say and the next word to write. But we're brought through, and a lot of poets who admire, who've written lots and lots of books, will say, I finished the book, and now what if I can ever do it again? Because there's this idea of the muse and inspiration, and how do you find your way through, because it was something that didn't exist and now it exists because you created it, art. So it is a process. It's a process that you're trying to navigate your way through, and no matter how much you do it, there's not necessarily a clear path into the next poem. We have rituals, we have processes, we have things that we do, we get better at it, but it is always sort of those first steps into the unknown, like you said, into the storm.
Wow.
Finding your way. But there is something truly amazing when you do write something that affects people or touches people or helps them in some way. That never, people who say, oh, I write for myself. I'm like, well, you might, but there's also something really amazing about putting it out there into the world and helping other people and connecting with other people through it.
I'm curious, Nicole, has there ever been a time or a specific poem that really has gotten a lot of feedback positively, that it touched people's mind and heart, that you've written, or a piece of writing, not necessarily a poem?
You were talking about, I think you were reading maybe Ruminate magazine. There were some pieces there. I think that's what you're talking about, the prose. For a while, I wrote kind of lyric essays for Ruminate magazine, and I wrote about quite a few topics, like my son being born 9 weeks early, and then a car accident that I had been in while my kids were in the back seat of the car. And I found that some of those pieces that were very human and about the experiences, the things we go through in our bodies, but then connecting that to the spiritual. I found that those people would say, oh, I went through that, or wow, that car accident, something like that happened to me and I felt this and this and this. And so I feel like the pieces that really are speaking to the common experience that many of us go through. But, it's funny because you say, oh, birth, well, that's so common, or car accident, that's so common, but it's not common when it's your story, and then I think sometimes when you find those commonalities, I'm sitting here with, this is my desk and I've got this pile of poetry books, right? But I've got books all over my house. And the reason is because I'm always going into them and looking for common experiences with other poets. And so that's how you find the ones that you love and you read over and over. So I think throughout my career, there definitely have been different ones, but the ones I think on birth and the car accident were pretty universal. In people relating to them.
That's interesting that you talked about wanting to be an archaeologist and then now you're a poet, because that's kind of, with archaeology, you're looking for things, you're discovering that art of discovery, and that's kind of what you're doing. They're similar in a lot of ways. You're trying to you're digging for something.
Yeah, I think also retelling family stories. My grandmothers are deceased now, but my maternal grandmother, her mother was from Poland, and they had they came over, in very early 1900s, and her parents came separately on 2 different ships, and they didn't speak English. And, so she would tell me these stories, and there was this interesting intersection of like Catholicism and like kind of old world, superstition that came together. And she would tell me these stories. And so these stories weave through my poems too. And so I think, wow, so somebody who's no longer here, and their stories now are here, and someone else listens to them. And so we kind of pass that on and pay that forward and kind of give witness to those experiences. But I guess that's what all stories do in a way. We just are telling, even our voice, our inflection, just the way we tell it can slightly change somebody's experience of hearing it, and then how they tell it and pass it on.
Wow, such great points. I'm learning so much and I'm getting very educated. I think this is actually going to help me in the future tell stories better and deliver speeches better just by hearing how you talk and what you're sharing, to be able to, share it in that way that really, it changes it. You're right. It changes it, even how you say in your voice and all. So thank you for this education. I'm enjoying this. I hope our listeners are too, as they listen along. So Nicole, you mentioned a little earlier in our talk here that God really led your business. He really led you to it. And from what I heard from it, it sounded so beautiful. And I'd love for you just to share a little bit, maybe how that happened in your life. Because there's a lot of people out there that are not happy with what they're doing. They're like, what is next? And sometimes it requires a leap of faith, that I would presume probably happened somewhere along the lines.
Yeah, it actually, it's a good story because I had been in my corporate job for 11 years and I was really tired. I had a long commute, and but I had a good job. I was an editor-in-chief of magazines and headed up content marketing and professional development departments. But I was so tired, and I was also torn because I felt like I wanted to be there for my kids, but I would go off to work, right? And I was already doing what I could do. Like I would work at home some days, and my mom would watch. My husband worked his schedule so that we didn't have to use daycare, but it was really hard. And then one night I went to go pick up my kids from my mom's house, and I ugly cried in her bathroom. I was thinking, how can I keep doing this? Like, I'm so physically tired. And the next day they called me down to HR and said, your position is being eliminated. And,
wow.
And so, I went through the whole gamut of emotions, humiliation, yes, sadness, anger, why. I mean, it turned out it was a financial decision. But when I called my husband, he's like, that's great news. And I'm like, what? but this is the funny thing. I started applying for jobs. I thought it would be super easy for me to get one with my qualifications. I didn't get one job offer. And this went on for a few months. And then this idea came into my mind, maybe I should launch my own business from home. And not everybody in my life was like, you should totally do it. I mean, there was not one negative voice. There's always one person who's got something to say, but there was nobody this time. Everybody was like, go for it. And my parents thought it was great. So my mom started praying for me every day for the business to work. And she still prays for me every day. So it's like almost 3 years later. And then she had some people praying for me. And it was so strange how I had never run a business, and yet things kept kind of working. It was like, in business, they say, just take the next right step, the next inspired action. And I started doing that, and things started unfolding. And so as my severance package for my job was about to run out, I was like, I got to do this. Like, this has to happen. And the next month I started making money writing, reaching out to companies and writing and making money. And like, listen, it's not like I haven't had ups and downs along the way, because being an entrepreneur has ups and downs, and you're trying things and learning things. But I'm here with my kids every day. I don't ever have to worry anymore about if there's a snowstorm, if there's a pandemic, who's going to watch them? Here I am.
Right.
It's not a challenge of figuring out the balance of, doing your work. Like today I got up at 5 a.m. So I'm a little twitchy, that's why. But that's
why you got your coffee.
Right, that's right. So not that it's perfect, but I will say that it's amazing how I found business coaches to teach me the right things at the right time, the right people who were kind of doing the things that I wanted to do, finding the skills that I needed. And even my husband said, I can't believe how much you succeeded in your first year. Like, I don't, he was like, I don't even know how this could happen. And I was like, well, it's God, right? And so I started praying more myself. I started saying the, Chaplet of Divine Mercy every night, and other prayers, and just really started thinking like, wow, and Padre Pio, he's one of my favorites. Just started really praying a lot and feeling like how amazing it is that to see God work in your life. I mean, just a few months before I was laid off, I thought to myself, how amazing it would be to work from home and not to have to worry anymore about business meetings and business trips and who's going to be with my kids. Yeah. And then here it is, and it's happening and it's succeeding. And even despite the pandemic, I'm still working. And I said, wow, if that happened now, I wouldn't be prepared. But now I can't be laid off anymore. I can lose clients, sure, but I can find new clients. And so it was a leap of faith, but then my faith has been rewarded watching how I've been able to sustain what I needed with the money that I needed to do this. And it feels sustainable, that it could be something I could do for the long term. At first it was like, I was just so afraid I would lose it. The freedom that I had, I was so afraid I would lose it. And then I started to get more comfortable and say, well, God led me to this, and my kids now say, it's amazing that you're here. Like, we can't imagine you not being here. Like, don't go back to a job.
Right.
So that was like a huge thing that I went through. And I think, and so every day when I'm, say, trying to figure out how to make it all work in that particular day, I try to come back to that place of, it may be a little hard right now if the kids are, trying to do their homework and I've got a client deadline or whatever, but God kind of brought this all together, and he's like, this is where you're living, this place and this time now. And so I'm giving you what you need to get through it and be okay.
Wow, that is incredible. I love hearing these stories. And you said something that really was a key thing for me, how you continue to pray. Your mom continues to pray. These prayer warriors continue to pray for your business. I'm a small business owner as well. In addition to being a youth minister, that, Nicole, for our listeners, they don't know. And, I always think about how God led me to the different things, that I do in my life. As I mentioned earlier, I was a graphic designer, but I lost that job. And 9 months later, a door opened up for youth ministry. And I've been in that way longer than I ever was in graphic design. So God really does lead you in different ways. But I have to remember, you just brought such a great point for any listeners out there that are business owners, to pray for your business in general and thank God for it. That's such a key thing that you mentioned there. Very inspiring to small business owners, especially during these times. So many people have been hit in different ways right now with difficulties, especially as small business owners, and with the pandemic and everything else going on in our country. So it's a really difficult time, I think. And to remember to pray, just to thank God for what we have, and that freedom with your family. What a gift. What a gift. Your children will never forget this time that you've been able to spend with them at home. That's awesome.
I was sorry.
Go ahead, Pete. No, you're up,
with Pete. You talked about your clients with your business. So who are your clients, Nicole? Can you speak a little bit more about your Strand Writing Services?
Yeah, most of my clients are businesses. A lot of them are in the they're apparel companies, clothing companies, because that was the industry that I came from, the magazines that I was in. But I really have clients across the spectrum, in architectural glass and, wellness and health and fitness and some of the arts. Most are companies, but I also do work with small business owners because I have obviously a soft spot for people who are entrepreneurs and taking that leap. And it's, just because a lot more people are doing that anyway. And, really what's interesting too is that I have a journalism background and, an editorial magazine background. And then somewhere along the way, when everything started going digital, content marketing started to become more of a thing. So, content that educates but still talks about a brand, but it needs to be written well. It has to be written editorially. And so in the job that I was in, I was able to kind of straddle that fence and do both. So then coming into my business, I had to learn how to run a business, but I already knew how to write content marketing. And especially now with everything just, being online, every single company needs some kind of writing. And it's funny because sometimes people ask me what I do. So I'll say, well, I'm a writer. And they're like, oh, cool, romance novels. And I'm like, what? And no, I write for businesses. And they're like, what could you possibly write for them? And I'm like, website copy, blogs, product descriptions, like the copy you see, like. But it's funny because it's almost like the forest for the trees kind of thing. There's so much writing. I mean, video scripts, social posts, ebooks. I mean, there's so many different types of content that companies want to put out. Companies are almost like their own little like media channels. So almost every company can use services like mine.
And that's, you're like flexing your muscles because you have different companies. They have different people that they're attracting, different just things that they're doing. So I'm sure you have to know a lot about. You're going from one to another. You're learning a lot about different businesses.
Yeah, and I mean, that's, I think, part of, having journalism background, learning about different industries, and then you kind of cross that with, conversion copywriting, which is like the art of writing copy that gets people to buy, but it's not like smarmy. It's helping people where they need help. So if it's, an article about, hearing aids, you're talking to people about living their best life and why hearing's important. You're giving them information to educate them and then hoping to move them along in the process. So it's definitely interesting. And people hire someone like me, say, as opposed to having someone in-house, is because maybe they have a shorter term project, or, people in-house in their marketing department or something, they're overloaded and they need, somebody else on the outside who's just doing that. Maybe they want their whole website rewritten, and they're like, well, if we have someone on the outside sending us the content. But a lot of the companies I work with, I stay with for the long term, that I've worked with them for months and months, and even some for 2 years. So it's definitely a good arrangement. And, especially with being able to run a business from your home office and your overhead is your computer and I guess your brain. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to, 5, 6, 7, like if this happened to me at a different point in time, I'm not sure I'd be in the same place. I mean, it's similar with poetry. Like even back in 2012, it was, a lot of people were not online with poetry and journals, and now everybody is online. And you almost don't want your poetry published in a print journal because nobody's going to see it. You want it online so that people can see it and they can share it and read it. And so everything's online, which can be good and bad, but it's good, obviously, because we can watch mass live stream from the church. So technology definitely has its advantages.
Yeah, that's for sure. That is one thing I learned. I always believed in that and believed in using technology for the good, but through this pandemic, it really fired down in me, or just compounded in me that yes, technology can be used so much for the good. But, well, right now we're on a Zoom call. I mean, we're in 3 different places, and yet we're all sharing about this topic. It's so cool. It's so cool. So, Nicole, you mentioned a few saints already. You said Saint Hildegard. I love her. She's a great saint. Yeah. And another love of mine, Saint Padre Pio. Are they particular influencers? Are there any other influencers of saints, or even just devout Catholics that have influenced you in your writing throughout, and of course your faith throughout your years?
I really am attracted to the visionary type, the mystic type. Just because I think that transcends. I mean, Hildegard, obviously, she wrote poetry. She had mystic visions, although I know that she was accused of having visual migraines, and that's why she would see like a fire. But, her Teresa of Avila is another huge one. I really also seeing Teresa the Little Flower, just because of how peaceful her life was, and how it's like you can, maybe I'm not doing something extraordinary, but I can do something small and that will be enough. Even Padre Pio, he said something like, becoming perfect isn't easy. Like it's going to take your whole life to get there. So just do it a little bit at a time. I don't know if you heard this, but in Italy, when this pandemic was going on, a nurse said that she approached, there was a hospital, and she went and she looked in the room, and there was a little boy in the bed, and she saw this old man like kneeling next to the bed, and she's like, "Get out of there!" Like, she thinks it's the grandfather stuck in. And he turned, it was Padre Pio, and then he disappeared. Oh, wow. And the boy, the next day made a full recovery. So,
wow, I didn't hear that one. That is pretty awesome.
It's on social media, so I guess take it with a grain of salt. But there's just so many stories.
Yeah.
Also, Maria Esperanza, like her stories, that are so inspirational. But this idea that God is going to be able to communicate to us through people, through dreams, through visions. So He's still communicating with us in this really kind of mystical way, I think. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. You said some of my same favorites that you mentioned, of course, Servant of God, Maria Esperanza, and Padre Pio. And I think in our parish, in our area as well, they're well devout saints, well-known saints, Father Maslow, Saint Padre Pio. So we hear a lot of homilies that incorporate him, which is really cool, because he's an amazing saint and inspiring in so many ways. So inspiring. That's great.
One of the things I saw you wrote, Nicole, just getting to I love how you say, if I can read your writing, is that okay? Do you mind if I just quote?
Yeah.
You say, when I write alone, but I also write alongside many other souls cloistered within still bodies. We write our nows into forever. Like, I love that. Because that goes into the whole making sure that, you're writing something that's going to stand the test of time.
Yeah, and I guess that's our hope as artists. I don't know if you know this poet Rainer Maria Rilke. He's so I don't know if he was particularly religious, but he went to this monastery and he was there for some period of time. He wrote like a poem a day, and he wrote this book called Love Poems to God. So I don't know if it's particularly Catholic, but I think what's amazing about it is that it's just so raw and heartfelt. And he talks about his relationship with God as if God, needs us to love him, like humanizing God, personalizing God. And so you see the shades of emotion that Jesus displayed, when Lazarus died and he cried, and it's like, we're going to raise him from the dead, but you're crying, you're feeling that grief. And so Rilke does that. And I think often when I write, I imagine him in that cloister and writing these poems to God. And I think that was a shift. At some point in time, I came across that book, and I have a lot of his. I have like all of his books basically up to right here. But so that's what I imagine, that we're all kind of writing together, we're experiencing life together, and if we can write it down, and there's something I think that God does inspire us when we write. Hopefully, that we're putting some truth about our experience here and what we should be doing into the world. So that's why I do write a lot about like the cloistered images. Even the idea of like cathedrals and the medieval art and how that was the way that people got educated, about the faith back then. We went to France a number of years ago, and I remember going into Chartres and seeing you can't even imagine how high, right, it goes. And it's like, it's so, we're thinking, how did we build this?
Yes,
years ago, but it's just so amazing. But that experience and the stained glass and the Gregorian chants and all of that, there's something about it that just evokes the ascendance, to heaven.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think sometimes being in those types of spaces or evoking that, when I sit down to write is, sort of alters my mind into a different place to kind of write about those things.
I'm curious, as a writer, do you write when it's completely silent? Do you like meditative music on, like instrumental music, or like how is it that you sit down to write your stuff?
Well, it kind of depends, with kids and pandemic and all that. But
are the kids screaming in the background when you're writing?
Right. I actually listen to Gregorian chants a lot. It's something I've always been into, but I got into more recently. So I'm still kind of like listening to different, interpretations and different people who do this and different monasteries and stuff. But I find that almost has this this mind, I don't want to say mind altering because it makes it sound like drugs, but it's like there's something about like the sound waves or that something about it, the vibrations maybe that just like makes you a lot calmer, and helps you tap in someplace different. So I used to listen to like more upbeat, music when I like dance music or something when I wrote, and then I started listening to Gregorian chants, and I found that that's almost more inspiring. It propels the writing along even better. But yeah, usually I have to listen to something because there's always background noise here.
The downfall from working from home, right?
Right. Listen, it's not all sunshine and roses. It's like I know people will put it like, oh, my life is it's paradise, and it's like, but it's not. But I think what it is it's big picture. It's like the big picture of how you look at it. Nothing is ever perfect all the time. How could it be? I mean, but I think the big picture of being able to say I can run a business from home, I can write poetry from home, I can reach people on the internet, and I can then go out of this room and see my kids.
Right. And with your kids, can you tell us a little bit about them? Like, I know you have Grace and Zach, right? Mm-hmm. And you said Grace is 5th grade and Zach, was it 1st grade?
First grade.
Okay. Yeah. So are either of them, do you notice getting into writing or getting kind of taking on what you had that passion for at a young age as well?
Well, they're both really confident, boisterous, like full of energy, which is amazing because they have so much confidence in themselves. And I feel like if they keep that, that's going to be amazing. Grace does write and she also does art. And she wrote me this song for Mother's Day. And she called it Glow. And I'm kind of amazed because the way she'll make the melodies, but the way that she creates the melodies is very much like the way she colors. There's like a sort of a harmonious chaos, which is kind of like my own work, which is how people have described it, like the sublime with the grotesque, the discordant with the harmonious, but it kind of all comes together. And so I noticed that about her. And then Zach loves to build stuff, so he can put together stuff that you wouldn't imagine. And he's also got this very like sensitive nature that even at his age, he notices things and he's very like spiritual. So it's funny though, because they both know that I'm a poet, and I always think, well, what is it like to have, an artistic person for a parent? Because my parents are not artistic, and they're just very matter of fact. And so Zach will say to me, oh, I heard this poem and it was so horrible compared to yours, or things like that. Or they'll say, let's work on a poem. And it's just really cool to have that, be able to talk to them about art and how it is accessible. We talked about it earlier. It's accessible to everyone. Anybody can paint, anybody can draw, and you should do that and share it with other people. And I think that's one of the really amazing things about it, is that anybody can do it and anybody can share it.
That's great. Oh, thank you for sharing about them. That sounds exciting. Like they're well on their way to really developing these gifts that they have at a young age in the arts.
Kari, I was going to say you took my question about how her influences in her music, because I was going to ask you the same question, because I know you're an artist. Do you have any like music that you listen to? I'm a music person.
Yeah, it's funny, as Nicole mentioned a little bit. It's changed a little bit since having a child, in the back, and he's young. My child's younger, so I have to really listen if he's crying or needs stuff. He's 2 years old now, but the first 2 years of his life was, super needy. Once I think when he gets a little older, maybe I can pull back. But when I'm working late at night, which is what I love to work really late at night if I'm doing art. And over this pandemic, I've had a little extra time to be able to dedicate to that. So I painted additional paintings on my son's wall of Disney characters. I started when he was born with some, and I've added now some during the pandemic. And I was working 2, 3, 4 a.m. because it's, no distractions, not even text and stuff. You're just focused, which is what I like. And I love at that point, I love having background music on. And it's a good mix on my playlist. I do a lot of contemporary Christian music. I do not do Gregorian chant. I will say that. Although I do like listening to that during Lent for meditative prayer. But I do. I'm a big Coldplay fan. I love Coldplay and some kind of music around like that genre, like that adult contemporary genre music, like a John Mayer and those kind of music. Like it's like kind of fun, upbeat, but not like rock or anything like that. Although I am a child of the 90s, like from being in high school. So I do love a good alternative rock music as well. 90s old, I can appreciate a 90s alternative rock music. So Green Day, things like that. So, hey, we'll see. A little bit of everything I guess you can find on my playlist for the most part. That's where I'm at. But I do appreciate music in the background. I do find it, as Nicole mentioned, inspiring. It kind of jives those creative juices for me to be able to kind of just work better and kind of, I don't know, you just kind of like feel it. You're like in the groove at that moment with that tonal background, and it kind of fires me up a little bit in my feelings of wanting to paint more and do more, and gets me in that zone, which is usually found about 2 a.m.
Nice.
That zone.
I got to see some of your work. I got to see some of your work. You got to.
Oh yeah, I'll send you some pictures of the mural and all. I posted on Facebook a while back, but yeah, I'll send. Yeah, cool. So yeah, that's me. But back to Nicole and her writing. Pete, do we want to let her read now? Did you think it's a good time?
How much time do we have left?
We have a little bit of time left. Sorry, I lost my timer, but I don't want it to go to the end without missing that. So why don't we do that? Then we'll have some time to comment on it and maybe share a little bit. We have about 10 minutes.
I think that's great. So Nicole, you have whatever you want to read.
Okay, so I'm going to be switching over to my document here, so I'll be looking at my screen while I read. I think I had sent you guys a few poems, and you indicated which ones you liked. So I just want to say, so the first one I'm going to read is called Littlest Bones. And just to provide a little bit of context, my son was born 9 weeks early. He was 9 weeks premature. And it was, scary. And he was in the hospital for a while. And I also was thinking about a young boy who had been martyred, right? And what his mother might have had to go through. So this is kind of me conflating the feelings that I had when my son was first born with this experience that this mother had of her son. So it's called Littlest Bones. As a child, my mother asked me, "Will you die for Christ?" Hickory incense. When I first held my 9 weeks early son, briars broken, lamentations, I thought to clothe him in my own skin. My dispersal into a flock, a swarm, a gallery of winged stars. How easy to imagine I could die for him. I admit it, I didn't want to live without him. Heaven's a place full of swans of milk. Before it ever happens, you make a choice. Littlest bones. His bones parted metal chimes, black calligraphy backlit through parchment. This wind. Imagine Jose Luis Sanchez del Rio, rebel fighting in the Cristero War. Delicate skeleton, seated to grow 12 pairs of ribs. Let's say the boy's captured. The soldiers tell him to renounce God. Jose's mother drew tiny star maps. Yes, the heavens on his soles. When I first touched my son, my mother said, "If he doesn't live, he'll be with Christ." Shiny silver fish xylophone waiting in his nursery. My gossamer son. Little bones, you'll bear my son to the end of his life. My secret ossuary. Jose's souls knifed off when he wouldn't deny. Imagine your child's martyrdom, your own. A choice some of us were born to make, like Jose, who walked on holy ghosted bone feet in love, in desperate love, shouting, "Long live Christ the King, Christ my King." Soldiers shooting, missing till they didn't.
Beautiful. Claps. That was awesome.
And I just have to say that what I love about being able to write poems like this is that mainstream poetry journals will publish them. I think sometimes there could be, I don't know if you would call it a stigma or a turn away from say something that's religious, but what I try to do in my work is to, like I said, humanize that story. And so I remember even when I was writing this poem, thinking about St. Teresa of the Little Flower, how she couldn't wait to go to be with God. And I remember thinking, well, if somebody told me that I was going to die tomorrow, I'd be like, oh, like, because, I've got to take care of my kids. And so
right.
it was real. And so I think that sometimes in the poems, it's like just, like, if you think about the music we sing in church, right? It's very praising God. And so I feel like I try to bring a little bit more of the experience of being human and the struggle into the poems.
Awesome. So we're going to move on to another one now,
okay.
Right? You said you're reading 2 today for us.
Yes. Okay.
All right.
So this one I actually wrote during the pandemic, and it's in a series that I'm going to include in my book in progress, and it's called Meditation Excerpt Annunciation. One of Ireland's abandoned cloisters. Elsewhere, white thorn wound around a woman martyr's head reliquary. Be still, wildflowers at its center, rising claret sky, its impossible nave. Burning yews, I walked into its feral stone, mossed shipwreck when I was 16. What I wanted is still the same, to change my life. Mary's yes, after the archangel asked, in his opulent shadows. How do you live after all of heaven says yes back? Yet we still eat sugared croissants. Wounds of grace, we're dying of love and strawberries gleam. Yet again, watching a hummingbird's tension, hovering, crimson, incandescent gorget, perfect little machine, sapphire smoke light. She said yes, joyful dart, a gilded prayer, to witness her son die. What can you shape from terror? In my faraway nights, when I didn't know God, the pieces assemble as heifers, slow moving in a herd of breath across my mind's diorama. My heart turning as my son jostles in his crib. Light on my tongue, our mortal scripture, foreshadow, forsake, and unbind. But heaven starts in the mind. Earth's not our home, illumined and charred.
Beautiful. Claps again.
Amazing. Now, do you
That's incredible.
Nicole, how long does it take you to write that? Do you do for me, like first draft or?
So what I do, it's hard for me to write bad first drafts, because if I write a bad first draft, then I'm like, I can't do anything with this. So what I do is I make lists of words in a Word document, words, phrases, and usually it'll be a page and a half, almost 2 pages. And then the poem starts coming together in my mind, and then I sit down and I start writing it. And I'll go through drafts, but I feel like when I sit down, the heart of the poem is there, the feeling is there that I want to evoke. And so when I finish one poem, I'm like, oh, I'm empty, now what? And then I start my next list of things, events, words, things that I want to include. And then it starts kind of filling up again until I feel like I'm ready to write it.
Awesome, I'm jealous. It takes me a while from, I'm scribbling, throwing out.
I think everybody has a different process probably in how it goes. I mean, again, I'm not a writer, but just seems
but
like...
I threw away my whole first book. The whole first book that I wrote, there was one poem I saved. And I never obviously had it published, but the whole first book was sort of practice, and I think we evolve. So the more we do it, the better we get and stuff.
Yeah, very true. Well, this has been a lovely time, educational for me, hopefully for some of our listeners as well, in learning about the art of poetry and the art of writing. And Pete, I don't know, do you have any final last words for us in this? Again, you're the expert I'm leaning on.
Stop it, Kari. I just love being in a room with creative people. In a Zoom room, I'm going to call it with creative people because I'm just filled up now from hearing from 2 very creative people, a writer and an artist, and I feel like I'm a sponge. I just want to soak up, your inspiration, both of you, and your, that vitality. I think it's wonderful. So keep it up, Nicole. And what is your website?
So my business website is strandwritingservices.com. And my personal website for my poetry is NicoleMRollender.com.
Okay. Rollender.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us.
We'll put that in the show notes, right?
Yeah, we will put that in the show notes. And Nicole, I want to thank you for your time today. Pete, thanks for being a co-host with me. And for all of our listeners, thank you for joining in. And we'll catch you again soon on Talking Catholic. God bless everyone.